I'm Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We're right here at St. Vincent College after the practice where Diontae Johnson first put on full pads. He's now with the team. He signed a 2-year extension to keep him with the team for the next 3 seasons. We're going to talk about that extension, what he said afterwards, his connection with Mitch Trubisky that he's been working on, and another all-pro NFL wide receiver, his connection with all that and more right here today with Jenna Harner from Channel 11 WPXI. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things at the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, hit the like button on this video if you enjoyed it. Hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our breaking news updates like we did have for Diontae Johnson's new extension. I'm Chris Carter. She's Jenna Harner from WPXI, Channel 11 in Pittsburgh. Jenna, how's it going?
Chris, it is great. I know you and I have talked since we've been out at training camp the last handful of days, but my goodness, it has been hot. And I forget sometimes how actually hot it gets at training camp when you're just standing there under the sun. And so, yeah, it's the temperature's rising. And I think everybody's, with the temperatures increasing, everyone's getting more and more excited as we get closer to the start of the season here.
Yeah, it does seem that way, right? It does seem kind of like everyone's getting geared up. Both the players, coaches, fans, I think even reporters, we're kind of like say, hey, we want to see football. We want to see these guys start to go to work. So that's been interesting. But one player who we did see return to action, of course, was Diontae Johnson. He signed a 2-year extension for around $18.355 million per year on the extension. It's a little over like $36 million per year. I think it's 36.7-ish around there for the next 2 years. So what this does is it gives them 2 years added on to the year that he was still on with the Steelers. So he'll play this season under that rate. It does give him $27 million guaranteed, so that's a lot of money. He'll play this season plus 2 more, and then when he's 29 years old, he'll be done with his contract. But Jenna, this was such a big news for Steelers fans because this was a guy, Diontae Johnson, who, everyone's like, when is this going to happen? Is he going to hold out all of camp? You saw this with T.J. Watt last year. He's not the guy. He's not the guy that's like a all-pro, defensive player of the year guy yet. He maybe get to that point for wide receivers, but he hasn't been there yet. So people are wondering, how is this going to work out? But it did. The hold-in worked, and it seems like both sides came together on a deal that I think was friendly to both the Steelers and to Diontae Johnson's future.
Yeah, I think this is such a win-win deal for both sides here, where Diontae gets kind of a little bit of the money he was looking for, especially, getting that $19 million, according to some national reports on the terms, because when the Steelers release deals, they don't disclose the terms.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, I was like, did we mess something up here? Like, Chris, what's going on?
No. I was just like, good point. That was a good point.
So, they're not disclosing the terms, but according to reports, obviously, him getting that $19 million, I think, was something that he wanted, getting that guaranteed money. But for the Steelers, because obviously there have been some ups and downs in terms of his, when he drops the ball, like we saw the latter half of last season. And of course, the 2020-2021 season a little bit more. So this feels like the type of deal that both sides really were happy about. And that was something too, when we heard from Omar Khan, general manager of the Steelers, for the first time since his introductory press conference earlier this week. He emphasized that, he said straightforward to us, they want to keep Diontae Johnson a Steeler. They want him to be here. They want him to get work in, and they weren't concerned that he wasn't. And obviously, because this was in the making, this was in the works here. But now he has his money. The Steelers say, hey, we don't have to commit to this big long-term deal where if things don't work out, we're going to look bad. And now Diontae gets to go out there and work with the quarterbacks as they battle to see who's going to be the top quarterback come, 5.5 weeks when they open up the season in Cincy.
I agree. It gives them flexibility, gives both sides flexibility, where if Diontae Johnson, say he becomes Cooper Kupp, say he becomes the best receiver in football, guess what? At 29 years old, the age that Cooper Kupp is right now, Diontae Johnson will have a chance to negotiate a new contract. Yeah. And for the Pittsburgh Steelers, if Diontae Johnson's just good or decent or stays on the doesn't grow from where he is now, all right, well, you had him for 2 years on that kind of money. that was all that you sunk into it, you can go somewhere else. This gives flexibility to both sides. I think what was most interesting to me about Diontae Johnson, this guy just got a major payday. He comes out, first pass, one-on-one, in live pads, everything's full. It's him versus Ahkello Witherspoon, who's the Steelers' top cornerback right now in training camp. And he goes a deep ball. Mitch Trubisky puts up a deep one, puts it on the money. Diontae Johnson blew right past Ahkello Witherspoon and made a big play. He wasn't like, hey, yeah, this is my stuff. Like, he didn't come in, he's still the same soft-spoken Diontae Johnson. I asked him about the process of waiting and trying to, being a little bit eager to get that rapport with Mitch Trubisky. He had this to say in his press conference after practice.
You could have hit unrestricted free agency in a year. Why stay here when your value could go up in a little bit?
It's just the grass is not always green on the other side. I was thinking about that too, but at the end of the day, I love being a Steeler. I love it here. I want to finish my career here. Just being around, it's just my teammates that just being around the atmosphere and the energy that they show every day, and that you want to be around a group of guys like that each and every day. And I feel like I said, I made the right choice. And I want to continue to be here for a long time.
Your first rep today in one-on-one, you caught a deep ball right against Ahkello Witherspoon and Mitch threw the ball. Have you been really eager to get that establishment with your new quarterback and Mitch? You guys got a little bit of OTAs and minicamp, but now the pads are on and it's really close to preseason.
Yeah, I've been itching to get out there with him, like I say, because just sitting back and watching the guys take reps or whatnot, you want to see those guys do good as well too, not taking nothing from them. It's just dang, that could be me out there getting them reps too. But I was just taking mental reps, I'm happy to get back out there with him. I was doing a couple of reps with him after practice too, just to keep the time down and whatnot. Like I said, so when I got out there today, it wasn't nothing different. It was just like practice.
It looked like
So, Jenna, from listening to that, I hear a guy who loves the Steelers environment, loved being with the Steelers. He wanted to hold in to protect himself so he didn't get hurt while he was waiting for his big contract, but he also was eager to get back out there. Then he's talking about how, me being out means they can get reps. And you hear the kind of not the selflessness there. There's hey, I got to protect me and mine, because if I get hurt during this training camp and it ruins my chance to make this my big NFL contract, that's a huge opportunity missed for my family. But at the whole time, he's there. He was staying after practice. He was working with Mitch Trubisky, the timing. And first pass, deep ball, the timing was there, and this was his first time working in a full practice, and this is we're getting to the end of the second week of training camp practices here. I came away impressed by Diontae Johnson in his big moment, still keeping that humble self that he's always had.
Yeah, that's exactly it. He doesn't change who he is now, especially that he just signed this contract and gets this money, because he is, at the end of the day, he also knows too, he is going to be this team's wide receiver one. I don't think there's any question about that, because of just the talent that he has and the youth among this group right now. He knows he's kind of that leader. And I think that, humbleness, that selflessness that you just mentioned, that's such a great characteristic to lead this young group of guys in George Pickens, in Calvin Austin, even kind of, him and Chase Claypool aren't crazy far apart in age, but having a little bit of that seniority where it's hey, this is how you go about things. This is how you carry yourself. This is kind of the way we want to be, especially when this offense is kind of trying to find their identity. But there was no doubt he was itching. You could see, even just on the sidelines when we were at practice the last couple of days, you can kind of see he was, he wanted to be out there. It wasn't a question of if he did or didn't. And he's still getting the work. And, it's not I think there are some things too during training camp where some people, that aren't there every day aren't entirely seeing it. But he's getting work in with the guys that he wanted to get work in. And he wanted to get out on the field. He wanted to make sure that this contract, everything was all tied up and, the bow was wrapped on it and everybody was, taking care of him and the Steelers. So now he gets to go out there and he gets to work with the guys that he knows no matter what, he's going to be on the field with whoever wins this quarterback competition. And for him, he has to kind of, like you said, and like he was saying, find that timing, make sure he has that rhythm with a guy like Mitch Trubisky, with a guy like Mason Rudolph, and with a guy like Kenny Pickett, depending on who's getting those reps at QB1.
Absolutely, and we're gonna see if he gets as he gets those reps. He's going to be wide receiver one now. He's going to be running with the first team. Whoever's gets to be QB1 gets to work with him. I thought it was also interesting. He literally used the word bored. Like he was saying that when I was doing all those individual drills, I was bored. Like he's saying I wanted to jump back in. He's like, but he also said he was willing to wait out the entire training camp if it took to get his new deal before he put himself at jeopardy. So that being said, interesting stuff for Diontae. We talked about the stuff today and the basic contract stuff. I want to look at some other things comparing him nationally because now he's gotten paid. He's part of that 2019 draft class of wide receivers. We've seen A.J. Brown, Terry McLaurin, DK Metcalf, Deebo Samuel, all these guys that are up for questions to getting paid. They're getting their contracts. Where does Diontae rank amongst those in the average? Also, some advice he got from another all-pro wide receiver he said he was really close to. We'll talk about all that and more here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, we got to talk to you guys about Dave. If you're living paycheck to paycheck or struggling to make ends meet, it can be really stressful when unexpected expenses come up. But now Dave can help you out in a pinch when you really need it. Dave is the banking app that can help you get to up to $500 instantly with Extra Cash. Extra Cash is a function that they have in the Dave app that can help you out when you need to fill your tank, buy a wedding gift, or catch up on bills. You can finally tackle those expenses that have been stressing you out without any hangups. There's no interest and no credit check needed. Millions of people are already downloading the Dave app every day to get the financial relief that they need with Extra Cash. So if you're in a pinch and you need some extra help, download Dave and think of it as a helping hand from future you. That's download the Dave app, D-A-V-E, Dave, in the App Store right now. When you sign up for an Extra Cash account, you can get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. That's dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking provided by Evolve. Member FDIC. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter. She's John Harner. We're talking about Diontae Johnson a bit more. Now, again, the deal clocks him at an approximate $18.355 million per year in his 2 extension years, which is an interesting rate to look at when you're looking at how he comes out here. If you look at all of the NFL wide receivers, and a lot of receivers, Jenna, especially just this year, have gotten big deals. Big deals. Tyreek Hill, super contract from the Miami Dolphins. Devontae Adams with the Raiders. DeAndre Hopkins still getting paid from the Cardinals, even while he's on the six-game suspension. Cooper Kupp with the Rams. A.J. Brown with the Eagles. DK Metcalf with the Seahawks. Deebo Samuels with the 49ers. Terry McLaurin with the Commanders. You go down the list. There's a lot of people getting paid right now. So he comes in at 17th, right below Michael Thomas's average of $19.25 million, but right above Christian Kirk's and Kenny Colladay's averages of $18 million. That's an interesting place to put Diontae Johnson. And I think it's also a place where recognize hey, you are among that upper ilk of wide receivers. You're not an average guy. You are definitely above average, but we can't pay you elite money. I guess the question is, what does he need to do to get to that elite status?
Well, I know it seems kind of, I don't want to say obvious because it's not the right word, but it just kind of seems like the easy answer here is catch the ball, because there's one issue, which shockingly, you're catching the ball, you're making plays, you're scoring touchdowns, you are helping your team win games. But for Diontae Johnson, we know that one of the big issues that has plagued him has been drops. He led the league in drops. What was it? 2 seasons ago, 2020, 2021. And last year, we knew that was a big focal point of his game coming into the year. He said, I'm not going to be that player again. I'm not going to let this happen. Every single game, every single practice, he's the first guy out on the field, working with tennis balls, doing, all these things to make sure he's not dropping the ball. And for the start of the season last year, we saw a lot of really good things from Diontae Johnson, but towards the end of the season, there were a little bit of, is this kind of coming back with the drops? He was dropping passes that he wouldn't normally drop. And it just kind of was like, is this kind of retrending in a little bit of a here we go again type direction? So I think, I feel like it's a little bit simple there, but it's just, can he prove that he is not that player? And can he prove that he is the guy? Because obviously he is this team's wide receiver number one, but can he be that guy where whoever's at quarterback is going to launch a deep ball down the field? He is going to make that play. He is going to beat out the opposing defense for that ball. And he is going to be a weapon that teams have to say, oh my God, we cannot stop this guy. How do we scheme around stopping this guy and this offense?
That's a big question, and if he can get to that status, that's where the Steelers want him to be. I've always said I feel like Steelers fans have been spoiled by having Antonio Brown for so many years, but it happens when you have just players who are who aren't the best of the best. Antonio Brown was the best of the best for 6 straight years. That's an unprecedented thing. That's why he was paid so highly. But Diontae Johnson, he's of the best. Like I'd say he's working to get into crack that top 10. And he did improve in drops. I brought this up a lot on the podcast before, but in the NFL, he was registered by Pro Football Focus to have 8 drops. That sounds like a high number, but that was tied for 12th most in the NFL, with Deebo Samuel having the most at 12. Jamar Chase had more. Laviska Shenault, Tyreek Hill, A.J. Brown, Jalen Waddle, Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp. All of those names I just said had more drops than Diontae Johnson. If you're thinking, oh, well, it's because they got thrown the ball too more. No, Diontae Johnson actually had the second most targets of all players in the NFL. And when you look at players who got around those kind of targets, even if you had about, say, 20% of 230 targets, which I guess would fall around a little over 40, between 40 and 50 targets in a year. When you consider all the players out there, Diontae Johnson isn't even near the top as far as drop percentage. You see a lot of players, Justin Jefferson, out there, and like I said, AJ Brown's in that mix. There's a lot of players who are in that department. Chase Claypool even had a higher drop rate than Diontae Johnson, as did Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, other big name wide receivers in the NFL. That's where I think it's the most interesting for Diontae Johnson. And if you look at catch rate for guys who had around those 40 to 50 targets range, he's ranked 40th in drop rate as far as, the 40th most. So that's a very good place for your number one receiver to be. But you are right. If the Steelers are going to pay him the money that he really wants, that $20+ million a year, if the Steelers want to see him be that elite guy, that has to be lower. He has to still be better, and he has to produce more. But part of it, I do think, Jenna, he's done what he's done so far in a year with Devin Hodges and Mason Rudolph, and in 2 years with the oldest version of Ben Roethlisberger that we've seen in his career. Yeah. I think he deserves credit for that. And that's where I think it's going to be interesting to see, okay, you're going to have a Mitch Trubisky or a Kenny Pickett or whoever wins the starting quarterback battle, and you're going to be able to see how you do with a young arm, and he'll be able to really make his mark to show, hey, this is what I deserve.
And that's what we've talked about for so long, right? Just how this offense is going to look with a new quarterback at the helm that isn't limited in the way that Ben was the last 2 years of his career. And again, not knocking on Ben, because what he was able to do, obviously this team made the playoffs. So clearly it was still, a successful campaign, quote unquote, in just terms of making the playoffs. Obviously every team's goal, of course, is to win the Super Bowl, but now you're coming into a year and a new offense with, something that's probably going to, there's no doubt Matt Canada is going to work things specifically for Diontae Johnson, but he has a guy throwing him the ball that not only has more mobility, but is going to be willing to take some of those risks more than I think we saw Ben take them the last 2 years he's been here.
That's going to be a big question in my mind. How risky do quarterbacks get? How many of those, like, for example, the deep ball he got against Ahkello Witherspoon, that wasn't something he could get often from Ben Roethlisberger. His arm just wasn't designed to launch many of those. How many times what kind of report can he get from Mitch Trubisky to get those deep balls? And how many times can he get a ball like that in a big game? Because if the Steelers, when Antonio Brown was on the field, a safety had to be over top of him, because if they weren't, he was going to destroy whatever cornerback, unless it was Jalen Ramsey or some super all-pro cornerback that most teams do not have. Yeah. And if the Steelers can get a presence like that on the field with a quarterback who can test you deep, it will force teams to go into more too high safety looks. It will force secondaries and even linebackers to say, hey, we're going to stay back a little bit because we don't know, how deep they're going to go with this. And that guy's dangerous. And then it also takes the pressure off Chase Claypool, off Pat Freiermuth, off Najee Harris, and lets these other playmakers, and George Pickens, who has had a fantastic camp, you're talking about taking the pressure off of those guys and forcing defenses to consider him. But again, I think it's a big reason why they wanted to sign Diontae Johnson. He is the number one receiver for this team. And when you look at what he's able to do separation wise, that's the best special part of his game. He talked about how he's been working on his separation and where he kind of gets it from when we asked him on Thursday.
Who taught you how to run routes like that?
I always know how to run routes, but I kind of pick my boys, Brandon and Stefan Diggs. We real tight. So if I got a question or whatnot, I can always go to him for something, you know.
So I think it's really awesome when players reveal like, hey, yeah, sure, he wears a different jersey than me, but we're still cool. And he says they're real tight. And Stefon Diggs, he's one of those big name players that's up there on the list. He's actually, if you look at per year averages, I think he comes in at the 6th highest paid player in the NFL right now. And he's at 29 years old, right where Diontae will be when his new extension with the Pittsburgh Steelers ends. I think it's cool that he picks his brain, but Diontae Johnson, you look at Stefon Diggs and Jenna, you covered the Buffalo Bills for a time. Stefon Diggs, what he's done there, he's able to combine speed with quickness, with separation, and really great hands. If Diontae Johnson can even get to like 80% or 90% of what Stefon Diggs does with Josh Allen, man, I think that the Steelers are in a great place.
Oh, absolutely. And if you look at guys across the league, receivers across the league, that if you're Diontae Johnson, you want to pick their brains, absolutely. I mean, what a great friend to have. And obviously, it's a small league. A lot of these guys are incredibly close, but to kind of have that ability to work with him and say, hey, what are you seeing from your quarterback? How do you work on these things? How do you pinpoint these things? Because what's one of the phrases? It's like surround yourself by people that are smarter than you and things along those lines. So for Diontae Johnson to be able to kind of say, hey, I want to have that little, and a lot of these guys do that. This isn't, just specific to Diontae, but say, hey, I want to see how you do it. What am I missing that you are not doing? And again, if you can take some of Stefon Diggs's game and say, hey, I like how he did this. I like this technique that maybe he wasn't doing as Diontae Johnson. Then all of a sudden it's like, hey, wait a second, there's more potential here. He can raise his game. We always hear the Steelers talk about iron sharpening iron. Him working with a guy like Stefon Diggs is doing just that. And then having the ability basically to take some of his game and implement it into his own, that opens up a whole lot.
It really does. And again, like, you look at Stefon Diggs, he's a guy who's completed his game. He wasn't, he wasn't the receiver he is now when he was with the Minnesota Vikings, even though he was catching game-winning touchdown passes in the playoffs. But, he sharpened his game. And last year, he only had 5 drops. And that's sharpening your game. And if Diontae Johnson, again, if he gets to where Stefon Diggs is, or even like really close, the Steelers are in a great spot with him as a wide receiver to lead their group. And again, they're very excited about what George Pickens is doing, what Calvin Austin is doing. They're excited to see when Chase Claypool gets back healthy. A really good place for this offense to be with their wide receivers. But I want to talk more about that offense in just a second here, because the defense continues to win reps and reps and reps at training camp. We'll talk about what we're seeing out here and just some more thoughts as to how we can see this offense growing once the Steelers start playing other teams out there in the preseason. But first, we got to talk to you guys about betonline.net, your number one source for all your betting stats and sports information. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NBA playoffs and the start of Major League Baseball season, which we know is well underway and is getting it through the mid part. But now that we're here through the end of the year, we know football's coming up. The NBA's coming back around. NHL's coming back around. And that means all your prop bets are scheduled and ready to go. You can go into betonline.net, find which ones work for you, and get yourself ready to place bets down and win big money as the season rolls around. Again, BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today. Use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action when you visit BetOnline, where the game starts. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter. She's Jenna Harner, and we're talking more about this Steelers offense. Now, Jenna, this was another day at practice where the Steelers offense had like 4 different turnovers, interceptions, fumbles. And some people see that and they're like, man, this offense is going to stink. I mean, I don't know if it will. I mean, maybe it will, but this is still an offense. Diontae Johnson, even with his first day back, you still don't have Najee Harris. You still don't have Pat Freiermuth. You still don't have Chase Claypool. They're still not at full, and they haven't been at full strength to build the rapport that I think they're going to need. And yes, I think there's a good chance they can struggle early in the season. But again, there's a lot of things this team is going up against. You're talking about on defense, T.J. Watt, Cam Heyward, Minkah Fitzpatrick, who, by the way, came off the non-football related injury list, which means we'll probably see him in full practice soon. He was limited on Thursday. That's a very good sign. But DeMonte KZ is filled in well. I'm going to talk about him for Monday's episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast because I had a really good discussion with him. But also, a defense that's well-oiled. They've played together. They know what they're doing. I think that there's a lot to consider there when, like, hey, these guys, the offense, yeah, sure, they're not the best right now, but they're finding their foundation, they're finding their strength against a team that knows their strength.
Oh, absolutely. And you have to look at all the factors, of course, here, because so many people look at it. It's like, oh, okay, the offense is struggling. One, the defense is always going to usually start camp a little bit stronger, especially a defense that's been together. Look at how many of these guys were integral parts of the defense last year. They returned so many guys. You're having, they have that rapport built. They already know that, and they know the system well. A couple guys, obviously Levi Wallace mixing in, but when we've talked with guys, they've said he's fit right in and he knows this defense pretty well for, how new he is to this team. But when you look at the offense, we're figuring out who the quarterback's going to be. Matt Canada is working to implement a new offense that was limited a lot last year because, again, of what Ben Roethlisberger's limitations were. And you're missing all of those guys. You're missing your top two, arguably, wide receivers. You have one of your rookies being your main guy, and George Pickens has looked phenomenal, no doubt about that. You're missing your top tight end and your running back one. I mean, if this was your fantasy team and everybody had bye weeks, you'd be hurting.
You'd be decimated.
You'd be decimated. You would lose, and the defense would come out. And so, of course, this is going to be something where it's going to take time with the offense. And luckily enough, there's still, again, 5.5 weeks until the season starts. I think you would be concerned here if the defense wasn't lighting up the offense and the defense wasn't taking advantage of missed plays and, miscommunications on the offensive side of things. That's still figuring out, again, how this playbook works, all these different types of factors that go into it here. In just kind of the fact that, again, this is still pretty early in the season. We're saying, oh my God, but we haven't even made it through 2 full weeks of training camp yet.
Absolutely. And I loved your analogy to the fantasy football team because your fantasy football team might as well have been injured all season long when we were playing head to head on FanDuel. Yeah, that's right. I'm coming over the top.
Wow. Shots fired.
For those who don't know, Jen and I do a show, Fantasy Football Insider, on Channel 11 streaming app during the season. So every week around like Wednesday, you can get fantasy football advice from us. We play a game where we pick our teams every week and we play. And I was just the champ all year long. It was easy, but we'll see if Jenna could come back again. But I'm sorry, I had to get my dig in. But
I know you had to get a shot in. All right,
I think your point's accurate. We still haven't seen the full part of this offense, and this offense is they need to come together. We talked about the entire point of this camp was they're finding their identity. We asked Mike Tomlin, who are they? And he's like, we're going to find out. But they can't even find out yet because they're still trying to figure things out. I will say, each of the quarterbacks, I think, has gotten better. I think Mitch Trubisky's timing has gotten sharper with his wide receivers and throughout the plays and the progression. I think Kenny Pickett has gotten a little bit better at that. I think that's his biggest thing. His timing needs to keep getting better, but he's getting there. Mason Rudolph, he came in with the best version of that, of knowing the timing of all the plays and the concepts, and he's continuing, I think, to hold that bar of having that part of the game being the best, but you're seeing him hesitate some in practice. And I think that you're going to see Mitch Trubisky, especially over these next 2 weeks, start to really catch up in that department. And then you'll really see, okay, now that both of you know the offense, now that both of you have had experience and developed that rapport and that chemistry, how do both of you do in a head-to-head combat to see who's going to be the starting quarterback? Because Kenny's still not there yet. They're going to give him time to build. But I think all that plays into how this offense looks and why I keep telling people to chill when they start seeing those 7 shots numbers and they're like, oh, the offense lost again. They're going to be terrible. No, the Steelers defense is just that good.
And if you're a Steelers fan, that's exactly what you're hoping for, right?
Mm-hmm.
Coming into the season, you know that the strength of this team is supposedly supposed to be this defense. So if the defense is going out and dominating at practice every day, you'd like to think that when they start playing teams when it matters, that's going to be a huge aspect of things. And when we start to see this team kind of get things worked in when the preseason games start, and what is that, next week? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, next Saturday. We're almost a week away.
I love this. I love it so much. But, when they start to get that work in against other teams, and yes, taking preseason games with a grain of salt, but how are they going to look? You want to trust this defense. You want your defense to be
Agreed.
the strongest part of your team right now, knowing that your offense still has time to gel, time to come together, and time to figure a whole lot of question marks out that a lot of people are asking.
Absolutely, Jenna. We gotta cut it here because I'm here at St. Vincent. I don't want to get locked into this building. And then they just find me tomorrow morning, just like sleeping on the floor here. But thank you so much, Jenna, for coming on. It's always a pleasure to you. Will you be there Friday Night Lights?
I will. Oh heck
Ooh,
yeah!
ooh.
It's Friday Night Lights. I can't wait.
If you're in the Pittsburgh area and you want to go see Steelers training camp and you haven't yet, and you're thinking, man, the heat is tough to beat, go to Latrobe Memorial Stadium in Latrobe, Pennsylvania. They're doing the Friday Night Lights practice. I believe it starts around like 7:30, I think, around. We will both be there. So if you see us around, don't be afraid to say hi. We do not bite. And in fact, I've been meeting a lot of great fans who have been saying hi to me, saying they appreciate the show. Just want to know I appreciate all of you for checking out this show daily, Monday through Friday, whenever you can. It means a lot when you say, hey, you help me get up in the morning, because I'm telling you, there's a lot of shows that help me get up in the morning. So to know that I do that for somebody means a lot. Jenna, thanks so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let me know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Well, thank you so much for having me as always. And I'm excited to see you as training camp progresses, obviously out on the field. You can find me on Twitter at Jenna Harner11, Instagram, Jenna_Harner, and on WPXI channel 11. We have all your training camp coverage covered, and we're getting ready for the start of the season. Let's go.
Absolutely. We're very excited for the start of the season. I'm Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. You can check out this show, the Locked On Steelers podcast, on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, hit the like button on this video. If you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our breaking news content, just like we did for Diontae Johnson. You can also find me starting August 15th. Which I announced this yesterday in the show. I also announced it on my Twitter. I will be with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Thank you, Jenna. I am very pumped about this too. I've joined the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'll be covering the University of Pittsburgh's athletic department. So Pitt football, Pitt basketball. I'll be there at those games as well. It's going to be fun. And I'm staying right here at Locked On Steelers. So you get the double dose of me as always. Thanks so much, Jenna. Thanks so much, you all, for checking us out. Back on your screens and in your ears. I might try to do some bonus episodes this weekend from our Friday night content based on how that practice goes. It might rain, so we'll see. But either way, you'll stay right here on Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We'll see you soon.